Arkansas Republican Congressman Rick Crawford joins me now. He is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Mr. Chairman, always good to see you. We'll get to Iran and Lebanon in a second, but I wanted to ask you about something our CBS investigative unit has put together. It has talked to U.S. soldiers who survived an Iranian drone strike that killed 6 American service members the first day of the war. And they've come forward to us to dispute the Pentagon's assertion that they were adequately protected. They say they were ordered to move to a command post in Kuwait despite intelligence that they told us showed it was a potential drone target and that it didn't have any drone defenses. Here is part of what they told us. Please play that.
What fortifications existed there?
I mean, I would put it in the none category from a drone defense capability.
None. There were no fortifications.
None.
What you're describing can be very painful for a lot of the families of the fallen heroes, for a lot of the families of the injured.
I'm very sad for their loss, and it's something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.
Mr. Chairman, do you think this is something Congress should look into?
Well, if that's true, then absolutely. I don't know that that's true. I haven't been briefed on it, so this is the first time I'm hearing about it. I would say that it's if you're engaged with an adversary like Iran, pretty much any target is potentially a drone target. So I would obviously have to reserve comment without knowing the extent of these claims. This is, as I said, I'm learning this now for the very first time. So if that's true, then certainly it bears congressional inquiry.
And it's not so much that bad things cannot happen against an adversary. Quite obviously, Mr. Chairman, they can. I think what they're telling us is that there's an assertion by the Pentagon that they were protected when they did not feel like they were protected and were sent to a place that was possibly even less protected. Would that, if true, concern you, and how much?
If true, certainly that would be a concern for anyone. But again, I think this is something that without knowing all the facts, this being heard by me for the first time as you're playing those clips, I would have some questions about how we're measuring levels of protection. I mean, if you lost your life in a drone strike, there's no level of protection that was adequate because you lost your life in a drone strike. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily a fair characterization of what constitutes adequate preparation and protection. And it could also be, if it is true, then we certainly need to, take all the appropriate actions to make sure that doesn't happen again. But like I said, not knowing the full scope of this, I would have to reserve comment until I know a little bit more. And at this point, this has not been briefed to me, so I'm responding in real time as you're putting that information out there. And so, yeah, certainly if this is the case, absolutely Congress will be all over it. And we want to find out if, in fact, that did occur. If it wasn't properly protected, we're going to want to know that and take the appropriate action.
I appreciate you responding to that, Mr. Chairman, very much. Where do you think things are, and how do you evaluate the Lebanon part of the story? Because yesterday the White House said Lebanon was not part of the ceasefire. Now the State Department said it's going to engage in direct negotiations to try to create a ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. How do you evaluate all this?
Yeah, Iran always presents somewhat of a moving target, and dealing with an adversary like Iran has proven to be difficult on a good day. They routinely violate their word. And so any kind of agreement that you may have had with Iran is certainly subject to change at their whim. And I think it's also reasonable to think that based on Iran's conduct with regard to their relationship with Hezbollah, with Hamas, with the Houthis, with the Iraqi Shia militia, and other proxies that have done and continue to do their bidding, that it's reasonable for us to think that Lebanon is actually part of this engagement, and therefore, we don't necessarily think that we're safe from strikes emanating from Lebanon. So, whatever action needs to be taken as it applies to curtailing that, I think is fair game. Now, if you're going to negotiate a solution and say that Lebanon is off the list of consideration, then I would think that with your relationship with Hezbollah, that you could curtail those attacks against Israeli targets or U.S. targets in the region for the sake of negotiations. But if you're going to try to lay this down as a marker, you can't strike Lebanon, but Lebanon, Hezbollah can strike you. That's a non-starter, and it's not even realistic.
How comfortable are you with the negotiations that have been announced between the United States, led by the Vice President J.D. Vance, and Iranian officials in Islamabad, Pakistan?
Well, I think direct engagement is probably the best way to go. If you can sit across the table from the Iranians, that might help quite a bit. I think we've seen in initiatives of the past where you've had intermediaries acting on behalf of either Iran or the United States trying to broker deals. It's just never really borne fruit. And so you've got three people there who are pretty formidable, and Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and J.D. Vance. And I believe that team, if there is an agreement to be negotiated, they can negotiate it.
Do you believe the regime has changed in Iran?
Absolutely, the regime has changed. I think they've gone several tiers deep in leadership cadre, and I think it has caused, at best, a disjointed leadership apparatus, and at worst, possibly rogue elements of the IRGC. And I think that's making it difficult from a targeting perspective. Also, it's difficult to anticipate what might happen next because of a disjointed leadership cadre, and even geographically dispersed also makes a little bit of a challenge as well. So, yeah, I think it definitely has changed. You know, a changing regime does not necessarily equal regime change, because I still think they're under that Mosaic doctrine as it applies to their ongoing governance. But I do think that's been made very difficult as we've gone several tiers down through the leadership cadre.
Very quickly, so if I hear you correctly, Mr. Chairman, you're saying it has changed in personnel, but not necessarily in ideology or the military firepower in which to internally carry out that ideology and punish those who object to it.
Correct. And I think this presents not only a challenge to us as it applies to negotiating some sort of a ceasefire or some terms where we can, a cessation of hostilities, as it were, but also presents a challenge to the Iranian people, in that the IRGC are extremely ideologically motivated, and anyone obviously that stands against them does so at their own peril. And yet there are millions and millions of Iranians that are crying out for liberation, that are actually applauding and supporting President Trump in what he's trying to do. And so there are various challenges being presented by this decimated leadership, and those that have emerged now at the top of the leadership struggle, I think, are exacerbating those problems.
House Intelligence Committee Chairman Rick Crawford of Arkansas. Appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.